had to feed the family. So, hang on, this feels like off. Hang on a minute. How is everybody doing? It's been a couple weeks, and I hope everyone had a good couple weeks. And I hope it's warm where you are. It's kind of warm, but not really. It's like rainy, and it's like that cold rain, that cold spring rain. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to jump right into it. Today, I'm going to talk about both first aid for fractures and sprains, and a few herbs that can help support your tissues and your joints and your muscles when you have a fracture or a sprain. So, interestingly, hi Paula. Interestingly, the pediatrician's office that we go to has now told me, oh, this was about, I'd say 6 to 8 months ago, told me that they are now treating in kids sprains the exact same way they treat fractures. So if your kid has a severe sprain, man, my hair is like looking great tonight. My son had a fracture. If your kid or had a sprain, it was a really bad sprain, and he needed a boot. So it was either like, okay, we can put a cast on him, we can put a boot on him with all the sensory issues. I was like, let's do boot. But they're now treating them the same. So if you have a kid that has a pretty severe sprain, expect that. I don't know if all doctors' offices are adopting that, but that's like the standard now. So, and when I say something is a standard, it means that's what the American Academy of Pediatrics is recommending. If you guys want to dive into that, the NIH, National Institute of Health website is a great website that I utilize regularly, like all the time, to look up studies. What I really like about that website is it's not like this head honcho of the FDA or this head honcho of over here, this pharmaceutical company is on here giving us all of this information. That's not what that is. What the NIH has on it is a whole bunch of medical information that is based on the studies, the facts. So it says, this is the problem we were looking at. This is who we use to get our information. This is our control group. This was, this is all the information that we gathered. This is everything we did. It gives you step by step, and it gives you the findings. And it's the doctor that did the study that is doing the publishing. So it's not like these big head honchos that are in charge of it. Of course, I'm sure there are articles and things in there that they have published. I'm sure there's stuff in there, but you can always find really, really good information. And in case you guys were, because we had touched on it before, and I had mentioned that I was going to share this information about medicinal mushrooms. If you guys are interested in medicinal mushrooms, I would highly recommend doing some research on the NIH website about medicinal mushrooms, like whatever one you are specifically looking for. I just went on there looking for turkey tail the first time when we had talked last time about it. And actually, I'm not sure if I did that in a live or if that was in a video. I know I made 2 videos on turkey tail, but I'm not sure if we talked about it in a live. And you will find so many amazing studies that have just tons of great information. So highly recommend that you check that out if you're interested in doing that. So, okay. But, so we said fractures and sprains are treated the same now. In adults, yeah, I don't think they are. I think it's in adults, we haven't had this experience yet, so I can't really speak to it. And I'm sure, like any other doctor, it's going to vary doctor to doctor, maybe hospital to hospital. It really just depends on where you go and how you have it handled. So with adults, they tend to be a little more not as conservative as they are with kids. With kids, they're still growing. There's bigger growth. We have to worry about growth plates and damage to the growth plates, because if you damage a growth plate, it can stunt the growing in there and can cause a lot of problems with the bone and in the joints. So they have to worry about that. With adults, our growth plates, for a large part, they're closed. So we don't have to really worry about that. So if there's an injury to a joint or to a bone, we worry about function. And long-term, is there going to be scar tissue? Is there going to be any bone spurs that could develop off of that? A lot of other considerations, really all resulting from injury and improper healing. So we're going to talk about immobilizing different types of fractures, And we're going to talk about, and the difference between fractures and sprains, just in case you guys don't know. And we're going to talk about some herbs that can be very supportive and can help promote healing when you have any of these things happen. So with a fracture, there's a lot of different kinds of fractures. There's, I guess, the two biggest ones that people know about is an open fracture or a compound fracture and a closed fracture. So a closed fracture obviously is a break that has not broken through the skin. Closed meaning your skin is still closed. You can still have a deformity and it's still considered a closed fracture. So that is called a displaced fracture. It just means the bones have been displaced. So my son, my oldest son, when he was 6, 7, something like that, he fell off some very high monkey bars and his hands went into the back of him to brace him and he fell down on his butt, but his hands took the brunt. So he broke his left arm, and this bone right here broke and they displaced. So instead of it being a break, this is really hard to do. Imagine these little tips of my finger are my bone. So these fingers being the bone that broke, instead of it being like, oh, it broke and there you go, they were like this, and his skin was like pushed up. And you could see the points. Like, I think if it had a little bit more force or if he weighed a little bit more, it probably would have become an open fracture, which is a huge emergency. But it was just displaced, so it went just kind of pushed up. They had to reset it. They had to set the bone under anesthesia, because I can't imagine how bad that would be for a child. That would be awful, but thankfully they put him under anesthesia. They reset his bone. He was in a cast for 8 weeks. So that was his whole experience. A lot of people have this experience with their kids, and it's all pretty much under the same thing. So what can you do herbally to help that? There are some herbs that you can do. It makes it more complex, and we're going to talk about all the herbs at the end, but I'm just going to say right now, since we're on the topic of a casted injury, it makes it a little more complex to treat. Can't say that. That's bad. To support the body with herbs, when you have a cast on an injury, because you can't put anything on topically. If you have, in my other son's case where he had a boot on a sprain, we could take the boot off and I could make compresses with a couple of these herbs that I'm going to talk about in a minute. And I could put that on and help promote healing. And his sprain, they were talking about like 6 to 8 weeks. He had it off in 3. Should he have? I don't know, because we were not going to go back and get a repeat x-ray. That wasn't something that's required for a sprain. All I know is his inflammation was gone, his pain was gone, his range of motion had returned, and we did little test things like, you know, bearing weight, and I checked his mobility and everything, make sure there was no issues in there. He still had full flexibility and everything. Well, it came back because where the sprain was, it really affected his range of motion. So he was fine. So that worked really, really well for him. But with my oldest son, I couldn't do compresses on that. So there are some herbs that you can take internally, because I'm going to tell you that because there's a lot of people that everything, okay, great. That's fabulous. You can be blocked. Enjoy. There we go. So I think it might be like Day of the Trolls, guys. We're just like 9 minutes in and we're already starting to get trolls. So you can take some herbs internally that can help support bone healing. But for me personally, I do not ever suggest it to people because it can cause some liver issues. And we'll get into that in just a second. So let me back up real quick and talk more about the differences with fractures and sprains. Typically with a with a fracture, a lot of people know right away that they've broken something. You usually can, well, a lot of the time, depending on the severity and the bone that you're breaking, you can feel a snap, a pop, something that is like, ooh, that wasn't right, and then followed by a lot of pain. Or it's deformed, or it swells up really fast, or you have some discoloration if the bone is fractured and displaced and it's cutting off any kind of blood supply or putting pressure on something. Some people, I've seen people have a fracture and then like everything beyond that fracture is numb, so it can put pressure on nerves, and then you have, you know, numbness and tingling. So any kind of weird symptoms like that, just go get an x-ray. Just go get your x-ray, because if you have anything weird, then it's causing continued damage in there, especially if it's putting pressure on blood vessels, on nerves, and you don't want to continuously have that kind of damage happening. You want to be able to set that bone and be able to relieve that pressure and the pain, because once that's set, it's way less painful, and be able to work on healing. You don't want to, well, we'll see how it feels in the morning. You don't want to do that. Now, I'm going to say that I've had 3 kids in being treated for broken bones. I have rough and tumble children, and we're a farm family. Things happen. So my daughter, when she was younger, she had jumped off a trampoline, not a farm related incident. She jumped off and I don't mean jumped off the trampoline. I mean, like, she was sitting down and hopped off. It was very like, like there was no like fall. Well, when she jumped down, she pushed it. She kind of landed a little bit cockeyed, and her right arm took the brunt of it, and she just landed just right. I mean, it was the trampoline to the ground, like the bottom of the trampoline to the ground. There was no fall there. And she cried for like a second, and then she went, okay, I'm gonna go jump, and she was off again. That was it. 2 days later, and the next day she was just like, it's sore. I'm like, yeah, you probably, twisted it because you landed funny. Let's put some ice on it if you want. No, we moved on with life. 2 days later, we were at a friend's house, and she jumped off of their ottoman onto the floor, and her hand barely touched the ground, and she started screaming. I'm like, I'm going to take her to go get an x-ray now. And it was broken. So she needed a cast for, I don't know, 5 or 6 weeks or so. And that was before I knew about, compresses and like all of these herbal things that you could do to help speed things along. She was so young though. There was nothing, again, she was casted, so I couldn't put anything on topically, but she was so young, I would not have given her anything internally at all. So there's all of that information. When you have a suspected fracture, or really, even if you're not suspecting it's fractured, but it's a very painful injury, like a kid falling off the monkey bars, but you don't see a real issue initially, or you have, like my oldest son that had the displaced fracture, what you want to do is you want to immobilize that appendage. Okay. So if it is, we're going to use his example. If it's the forearm. So those triangular bandages that I've showed in the past, if you haven't seen that, I'll put a link later on for you to go check it out. Shoot, I forgot my charger. But I show how to use a triangular bandage. So it's a bandage that basically, goes underneath the injury and then goes up and around, and one part goes back here, another part goes here, and you tie it on the neck, and you're hugging this in, so it keeps the injured area close to your chest, close to your body, and stable. So it's really important that when you're stabilizing this, this injury, that you really keep it in as close to the body as possible. The more wiggle room you have, the looser it is, the less effective it is. And you want to do that for a couple of reasons. One, obviously the pain. As soon as I put it, a compound for a displaced fracture is incredibly painful. So is obviously a compound or an open fracture. But as soon as I put him in that, we had a 45-minute drive to the hospital. We live in the sticks. So it was going to be a long time, and I needed to stabilize him, and we needed to do something. So actually, I did not have a triangular bandage. I had my sweatshirt, which can be used as a triangular bandage. So I put that on him, and basically what it is the top part goes on the outside, and then the bottom part just kind of you use it to kind of wrap it to make kind of like a hammock. And then you put one arm one way, one arm the other way, and you just pull till it's tight. So his hand was like way up here, and it kept everything just stable and snug into his body. And he didn't cry the whole way there. He whined, is like, this hurts. I'm like, I know, but we're going. But he did not scream. It wasn't agony. Every bump that we hit was not awful, because we're going down gravel roads on a lot of these roads, and he was okay till we got to the hospital. So stabilizing a fracture, incredibly important, not just for comfort, but also for safety. With fractures, specifically fractures that are displaced, they can continue to cause damage the more they're moving around. So making sure that things are secure and they are not going to be continuing to move around is incredibly important, because there's so many different blood vessels in there, the arteries, the veins, the capillaries. Like, there's so many different blood vessels in there. They're going through every part of your body, and the last thing you want is to nick something that's going to be, significant injury, and then you're going to have a bleeding emergency that, if it's a closed fracture, you're not even going to see it. You're just going to see maybe some bruising and some swelling, and you'll see that there's obviously more going on, but you're not gonna, that's precious minutes once that kind of stuff happens. So securing, very, very, very important. Excuse me. It's a kombucha night. All right. So if you have an open fracture is a compound fracture. Same thing. And with that basically means that a bone has been broken and has gone through the skin. So in that kind of situation, obviously, bigger emergency, right? You've got now a bleeding situation. They're scary looking, okay? It's a big mess. You usually have an appendage that's like completely twisted and does not look right. It's even scarier when it's a leg, because there's more stuff in there you got to worry about, femoral arteries and things. Bigger blood vessels. And hi, Alora. Way bigger potential for problems there. But you still have to worry about immobilization. But the very first thing you do is control the bleeding. Because if they, hi, is that Prasa? Prasa or Prasa? The very first thing you have to worry about is making sure that they're not going to bleed out. Your primary concern there. So we talked about tourniquets and how to put them on. It's not always necessary to use a tourniquet in this situation. You don't want to make the problem even worse. Prasa, we are from Illinois. So big concern you're from Iran. Well, welcome. What time is it there? It's like 7:30 here in the Midwest. So when you are putting a tourniquet on, that is for arterial bleeding or very, very large venous bleeding. So remember, arterial bleeding, if you caught the bleeding emergencies chat that we did, you're going to see bright red blood that's going to be pumping. It's going to be like squirting out as the heart is pumping. With every pump, it's going to squirt more. Arterial bleeding is very obvious. And sometimes it's not going to be like squirt like super far away from the body. Sometimes it's just like squirting a little bit here. It depends on the size of the artery. The bigger the artery, the more volume of blood that is in there, and the more it can escape with each pump. So if you see arterial bleeding, it is immediate a tourniquet, okay? Because they're going to lose a lot of blood really fast. And then with the adrenaline of the entire situation, it makes their heart pump faster, which makes them bleed faster. So we don't want that. So with venous bleeding, usually you apply pressure, but with a compound fracture, you're not applying pressure. So what you can do is you can try and in the ambulance, we had like these air sling kind of a thing that would squeeze that would squeeze around the injury and basically help stop the bleeding without having to put pressure on the injury. So you want to put pressure above it. It doesn't have to cut off circulation. You just want to get control of the bleeding, okay? So that's how you would do that. So, okay, let's jump into the herbs now, but hang on, let me answer some comments here. It's 4 a.m. here. Oh my goodness, I haven't seen 4 a.m. in a while. I picked a great time for dinner. Good, dinner and a show. I drank coffee and fell asleep. Oh man. If I drank coffee, well, I can't drink coffee anymore, but if I drank coffee right now, I haven't had coffee since like February. If I did, I would probably be up most of the night because it's been so long since I've had it. I'm having kombucha. Love kombucha. Pink Lady apple kombucha. This is, if I'm in a store-buy kombucha, which I have not made kombucha in forever, this is the one that I get. And then these bottles, these are the bottles that I store, these are my favorite to store tinctures in. These are my favorite. They're great because it's amber. They're great. I have dropped these suckers and they do not shatter. I've never had one shatter. I've said that. Now watch, it'll happen. So, all right. Let's talk about herbs. I know very little English. So do you have the translate button on? Like, do you guys have a translate? Like, I know for comments you can hit translate and you can see it. So, or do you have like captions on? Okay, so I have 3 herbs that I'm going to talk about. Comfrey is the first one. Comfrey, you guys have heard me talk about before. I'm going to talk about a couple things with comfrey. First off, it is fantastic for helping to promote healing in the bones and in the skin tissues and in the joints and in the muscles. It is a phenomenal herb for that. However, it has alcohol. This does not have well, it has a very, 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 very small amount of alcohol in it. In the US, it is not marketed as an alcoholic drink, so anybody can drink it. So yeah, I have 3 viewers. Jason, it has gone up to 20 here, and now it says 5 on me. It's all over the place. Salem. Well, Salem would be S-A-L-E-M. So S-A-L-A-M in English would be salam. Okay, so comfrey, fabulous herb for bones, joints, muscle, skin. Wonderful herb. However, this is where you're going to hear different herbalists say different things, because I am very anti taking comfrey internally. I do not think that taking comfrey internally is a good idea. And that's just in our situation, like here, like I'm sitting here telling you like, oh, here's these herbs you can do. Comfrey, if you look it up in different books, and I believe one of the books that I suggest all the time, Jason, if you don't like it, you can leave. Thanks for coming by. One of the books that I recommend all the time, the Modern Herbal Dispensatory book, that talks specifically about comfrey. Hang on, guys. We're going to take care of that. Yep. More trolls. What time is it here? It is 7:30 p.m. Okay, what was I saying? Okay, so in that book, they do talk about comfrey being able to be taken internally as a tea for helping to promote healing of bones when you're having like a fracture or a bone issue that is having a really hard time healing. That is something that you can use comfrey for. However, and you can totally do that. However, I do not ever recommend it to people because they do not, like any normal person, just kind of a lay person that does not have experience with herbalism and really knows how to do figuring out dosaging and timing, just like doesn't have a lot of experience with it. I always say you need to work with someone that does if you're going to be doing that. So just in like the basic education and everything that I provide here and on my website and everything, I tell people don't take it internally, or don't take it internally unless you're working with an experienced naturopath, herbalist, or a functional medicine doctor that has experience with herbs. So I have comfrey seeds stratifying in my fridge right now. Awesome. You may, just so you know, Alora, you may not see them germinate this year. They may not germinate till next year. I have heard of that happening with people. But don't give up on them. If that happens, just like if you don't see anything this year, you'll probably see something pop up next year. I've heard that as well. I use only topical. Okay. It means hello. Oh, okay. Well, interesting. Thank you for teaching me something new. So comfrey, yeah, external is great. Some of the ways to do it, you can, like I said, you can do a compress. Compresses are fabulous. Or you can do a salve with it. I love comfrey salve. Comfrey salve is one of my favorite things to make. It's wonderful. Yeah, Alora, if you get a piece of like cutting from the root, you can put those in the ground and then they take off right away. So when you're getting seeds, there's some herbs like uva ursa, I think is another one that can take a couple years to germinate. Like you're not going to see it. Oh, I'm sorry, Pressa. Um, when you see herbs that have like the cuttings, the propagations or the root cuttings from things, look into that herb a little more because your chances of things germinating and taking off and having a good crop for that year may be a lot higher. It really just depends on the herb and it depends where it's coming from. So if you're getting something from a completely other side of the country and it's coming, it's like if we were getting something, say, from Southern California and it's coming to Northwest Illinois, that's a completely different climate. And they're not necessarily going to grow the same way because you're not just taking a piece and moving it. You are taking a piece and moving it to a completely different climate. So you may have some issues there. So if I'm doing something like that, if I'm purchasing something from a completely different climate, like more than a zone or two out of where I'm at, then I will start it indoors and in like a big pot, and then you can transplant that. Because typically you don't want to transplant roots. They don't transplant well. But in something like that where it's a brand new root and it hasn't put out a tap root, it's not going crazy yet, you're just getting it established, then you can harden it off the way you would with a normal plant, and then you can transplant it. I've done things that way, and that's worked out really well. So it just depends. Do you have any Iranian friends? I do not. I got the seeds from Strictly Medicinal, and they were out of cuttings at the time. Yeah. So did you get the seeded variety or the unseeded variety? Because I think there's a few of them, but there's two. Unfortunately, I haven't found another source yet. So my friend Beth, is she Beth DeClerc or the DeClerc Homestead on YouTube? She's all about Instagram. So if you search Beth DeClerc, she's DECLE. Hang on, I can write it and no problem, or type it DECLERCQ. Okay, so that's her name over on Instagram. And if you follow her, she does comfrey cuttings. I think once or twice a year, and she sells them because she's got a ton of comfrey and she separates them out so that they don't completely take over, and sells some. So and she's in Michigan. So that'd be a great source too. I'm gonna get some from her, I think, this year. So she does that again. Okay, horsetail. Let's talk about the next one. Horsetail. Horsetail is fabulous for the bones. Same kind of deal, helps promote healing in the bones. The combination of comfrey and horsetail is phenomenal. I first came across horsetail when I was reading the Herbal Medic. Sam Kaufman is such a great, he's so wise. He puts out his book is phenomenal. I love it. It's the Herbal Medic. You can get it off of Amazon. It's great. It's a great book. And it's one of those books, like, honestly, I could sit and read the whole thing, or you can just read it in sections for whatever you need. It's designed so that it's interesting enough to sit and read it. And it's got a little bit of his back information in there, but it's also very much a resource book so that you can just kind of go in there for whatever you are looking for and get that information when you need it. So the Herbal Medic is a fabulous book. So he's a former Green Beret, and his mom, I don't know if she was an herbalist, but she knew the like a lot of things about herbs, medicinal herbs, and he grew up with them, like using them. So he's got both that, you know, kind of emergency medicine from being a Green Beret, which is like probably like flight medic level, you know, just out in the general community in like any other area, not military related. And the things that they do is just incredible. It's like more than any paramedic area that I have ever worked in or know anybody in. Yeah, I figured. I've been having a lot of issues with my phone changing things too lately. But yeah, I figured. I knew what you meant. True comfrey. Okay, so you may have blossoms. So if you have blossoms, then that's gonna seed and that's gonna be everywhere. So if you are in a space where you don't care and you can just let it go, great, let it go. If you don't want comfrey everywhere, then pinch off those blossoms or they're going to be everywhere. And pinch them off soon. Like don't wait and let them get a chance to seed because they're going to go everywhere. So just a kind of a heads up there. Okay, but horsetail is what I heard from the herbal medic, and there was a story that he shared about it when he had some kind of injury, and it was during, I think it was during some kind of training that he was doing, and it was going to knock him out of that session or that like time around to be able to finish it. And he's like, no, I'm not going to do this. We're going to go ahead and get this done. Cause like the doctor was saying, you're going to need surgery. It's going to take you out for a whole nother year at least. And he's like, no. So he got a hold of some comfrey and some horsetail. There may have been another one that he added to it, but I'm not 100% sure. And he was doing a poultice with that. So remember, a poultice is something that is only good for 24 hours, and you mash it up and you have some kind of medium. Like you can do a spit poultice where you're just using your own saliva, or you can mix it in with an oil, or you can mix it in with some distilled water or something. And you're just making a poultice. Okay. You're just making pretty much a paste and you're holding that on. And he would do, I think it was in his hand. Like he really did a number on his hand. And he would do, get that poultice going, and he'd wrap his hand, and he'd do that several times. I don't know if it was throughout the day or if it was just like during his down period. So it was like overnight and he would do that. I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've read the story. And, he ended up going back to the doctor, and he's like, well, I don't know how you did this, but you don't need surgery anymore. And he ended up being able to go through that training that he had. So really amazing testimony of how comfrey and horsetail can work together to support healing. The last one I'm going to talk about is arnica, but hang on, I have a couple people. Hello, my friend. How are you? I am doing good. How are you? And I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, it's something to watch for. Okay, so arnica has been kind of popular for its ability to work in the muscles. Arnica is great for the muscles. And if you have sore joints, a lot of people, unless there's some underlying issue, like if you have arthritis or any specific joint information, like if you have fluid in your joints or anything like that, that kind of is a little bit different of a situation. But if you're having like a joint strain, usually your joint strain, now like I said, different if you were having a direct joint injury or condition, but usually a joint sprain or strain is due to the muscles around your joint. So loosening up all of those muscles and supporting not just the joint health, but also the muscle around your joint. I'm doing my knees here because I have knee issues. It's just old sports injuries. So what I do, like when my knees are just kind of aching because like I said, I have old injuries and I have arthritis, then I will put arnica. I have an arnica oil that I like to put around my knees, and I'll put it sometimes it depends on how bad the pain is, but sometimes I can put it on my lower back on my SI joints too. Now, the nice thing about arnica, the nice thing about arnica is what it does in the muscles. So when you have an injury, you can get in some kind of muscle injuries, you can get little blood clots, like they call them microclots in the muscle, and that can cause pain inflammation. It can cause bruising. It does cause bruising. It can cause like prolonged inflammation and prolonged injury. Like it takes longer to heal. It can also um, you just inflame that whole area to decrease your mobility and your range of motion. So it's definitely going to um, be a problem if with healing. It's gonna make it go slower. Hi from Spain. Thank you for all this valuable information. Well, hello from Spain or from the US. Hi to Spain. Thanks for joining us. So we have someone from Iran here. So, and I asked her what time it is. It's 4 o'clock in the morning there. What time is it in Spain right now? So arnica helps to break that apart. Arnica is really good for helping to soothe the muscles and to break apart the damage and kind of like loosen everything up to help promote healing. So if you have any kind of muscle injury, if you've worked out really, really hard, you can have muscle breakdown. And I'm going to mention it just because it is constant. It is forever in my social media stuff right now. Rhabdomyolysis. Oh my gosh, rhabdo. Okay, we're gonna call the short version. Myolysis. I can't remember the whole name for it. But what it is muscle breakdown to the point that it is so severe that it's taxing your kidneys. So now the name for it is like everywhere right now, and people are, I guess, just becoming more aware of what it can do. But it doesn't have to be that condition. It doesn't have to be so severe that it's shutting down your kidneys and in turn shutting down your heart and things like that. It does not have to be that severe. That process is a long process, and it can be super, super, super severe when you have a lot of overdoing it. And a lot of the things that you'll see come up, it's like, oh, it's 1:47 in the morning. Yeah. So a lot of people that do CrossFit, you're seeing stuff in that. That is nearly everything that I'm seeing is people that do CrossFit really aggressively. They're doing it multiple times a day. They're having muscle breakdown. You have to support your muscles. You have to. And how you do that is protein and other vitamins and minerals. Like you have to have your protein too. That's going to help with helping your body to do what it naturally does to help, heal the muscles so that or restore the muscles, I should say. So, if you've had an injury, so say you twisted your knee and it's sore around the entire thing, or you strained a muscle, put arnica on right away because it's going to help prevent things from getting extreme, things from having severe bruising, things from having severe pain. If you've ever torn a muscle and you've had like that lump in like the tricep is a big one that this happens a lot with. The longer muscles, your hamstrings, that's another really popular one where that happens. Your calf muscles, those muscles can tear with extreme working out. Injuries, if you're overextending and it can tear muscle. Arnica is really, really helpful for that, just to help with the healing process. So that's what I have for you guys tonight. So we talked about fractures. We talked about open fractures, closed fractures, sprains. The one thing I didn't touch on, let me talk about that real quick, is when you have a sprain. So sprains can feel pretty similar to fractures in that you still feel that sharp pain, and they can still be extremely painful. They can still swell up right away. They can still turn all sorts of pretty colors, and they can still cause problems with your range of motion. So if things have, I wish I had known about this herb years ago. I'm a klutz and strain muscles like that frequently. Oh yeah, well, get yourself some arnica oil. There's a lot of them on the market. Again, just grab an organic one, and you're good. Okay, so what was I saying? Okay, with strains, or with sprains. So if you're not sure, you're like, did I break it? Did I sprain it? You want to give it a couple days. I always err on the side of caution because it's going to depend how we're going to move forward, how we're going to support the body while it's going through the healing process. Do they need a cast? Can we get away with a boot, or do we just need a brace? Or am I going to be able to use my comfrey and horsetail? Am I going to need that? Is arnica going to suffice? Like, what are we working with here? But here's the thing. If it's like, say you, like in the case of my son, when he sprained it was like into his foot, halfway into his foot. Like if this is his foot, like here's his toes and this was in his foot, it was like in here and like right in the middle here, right into like under his second toe. And that, when it's in the foot, when it comes to feet, toes, they're not going to cast you for unless it is super severe. And then in that case, it's usually surgical. But because then they're going to like put pins in and you're going to get a cast. But if it is in the foot, underneath the joint, okay, so really like here's all of these little bones that make up the joint. Underneath that, especially in kids, you've got a growth plate. And well, only in kids, you've got a growth plate, but you've got these long bones in the foot and in the hands. And if you break these long bones, that affects your ability to be able to move your phalanges here, to move your fingers and your toes. So if those break, it's cast time. So if you have a lot of swelling and it's a minor break, it's really hard to see the fracture. So they will oftentimes make you wait 24 to 48 hours until the swelling goes down, and then they bring you in. So in that kind of situation, what I do, arnica. So I put arnica on because it's not going to improperly promote healing for a fracture that could be displaced and you're not 100% sure. I hold off on comfrey and horsetail until I know exactly what I am dealing with. And in that case, just the arnica, because it's going to support all the tissues around there, the muscles around there, and it's going to help with a little bit with pain. So it's going to still be supportive and help promote healing, but it's not going to work directly on the bone. So that's just, it's pretty, like, first few layers. It's not going all the way into the bone. So with his foot, they didn't think that there was a fracture. They're like, we can see it, and there's obviously something there. So it's either a very small fracture or a very severe sprain. So we went with sprain and went with the boot. So that worked really well for him. So, because I think in a cast, things would have been difficult given all his sensory issues. So, one more thing you can do also, if you are in a position where you can put comfrey and horsetail directly on an injury, highly recommend that you add a little castor oil and some heat to that to help expedite that. So what that's going to look like is, if you're going to do a poultice, okay, so poultice is like you're making, or no, not a poultice, a compress is what I was going to say. If you're going to make a compress, that is taking some horsetail, taking some comfrey, and making a strong tea. So that means a big dose of herb, boil into boiled hot water. So boil your water first, then you put the herbs in, you let it sit for like 20 minutes. We're making a strong tea here. And then you're going to put a cloth in there, and you're going to let it get good and soaked in there and wring it out. And then you are going to, first, you are going to put the compress on there. And then you can take another cloth, another compress, soak it with castor oil, and you put that on top of that. And then you put heat on top of that, and everything is going to drive in. You can also do like a comfrey horsetail salve, and then you do that comfrey compress on top. Words are escaping me tonight. Usually on Monday nights, my brain is like done by the time I get on here, and I'm like, what was I saying? So thanks for hanging out with me despite all that. But then you put a heating pad on top of that, and what castor oil does is it drives into the skin, like deep into the skin. And remember how we were talking about that NIH website? Look up castor oil. You're going to find a lot. And it helps to drive anything that's underneath is going in the skin with it. So if you've got that castor on top of some comfrey, on top of some horsetail, it's driving in. So, and it's gonna work even faster. So does anybody have any questions on anything? I have some other information, but I think I'm going to save it for the next live or two, in the next week or two. I'll share all of the information that I was going to talk about tonight. for a couple reasons. One, I'm still not 100% sure, but I will tell you it has to do with some changes that you're probably going to see on the website. If you guys are on the website, if you are in my Herbal Collective community, nothing is going to change in the community. Things are just getting better there. So I'm excited for next month's content. Everything is going to be about growing herbs. So we're talking about cold stratifying. We're talking about scarifying. We're talking about what herbs. I've got charts and everything ready for you guys for herbs that need to be direct sown, what herbs like heat germination, what herbs like to be light germinated. What else? What need to be surface sown, what can be planted in the fall, like so many different information. Got charts, I've got printouts, and then we'll have a little bit more coming in later in the month, and some how-to stuff. So much information. So I'm really excited about this one. And then of course, this month was all about getting started, since it was the first month for, I had like pretty much, if you were on my email list, you got emails about being able to get into the first month. It's not totally open to the public yet. It opens on April 1st to anybody that is not on my email list. So if you're on my email list and you haven't seen that, check those out. I'm going to have another one, put another email out, coming out soon, that's going to have all of that information. So if you want to snag that, then you can. And then next month will be all about growing, and I'm super excited about it. Thank you. I'm off to put the toddler to bed. Have a wonderful evening. You too. Enjoy your bedtime. So yeah, I have great information coming with that. And then some changes that we'll see in the herb store. So, and I will talk more about that in the next week or two and give you guys all the information there. So I'm going to go ahead and hop off because it's just about 8 o'clock, and that means it is my daughter's bedtime. We need to get her to bed. So I hope you guys had a great time. I hope you guys have a good night, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.